Hi, welcome to Caldwell County Schools WIDA Standards Training. First of all, I'd like to go over a few acronyms that we use so that if I mention them in the video, they'll be clear and not confusing. We use the term ESL as English as a Second Language. This refers to the program, an ESL program. We use EL or ELL also as English learner or English language learner. The more updated term is the single L, English learner, and this refers to the student. LEP. If you hear us say a student is LEP, that means they have limited English proficiency. They are limited English proficient and they have not tested fluent yet. MFEL or MFEL, monitored fluent English learner. After a student is considered an English learner, they have tested limited, and then they exit the program by testing out. The student will be considered monitored fluent for 4 years afterwards. That means that we'll be monitoring them for academic success. WIDA stands for World Class Instructional Design and Assessment. They are the company who's responsible for the assessments for English learners that we use in our state and also our standards. Access, this is the yearly assessment for all English learners, for all LEP students, and it is a gauge of their ongoing linguistic progress from year to year. The WIDA standards, they are a bridge that enable ELs access to content. WIDA acknowledges that language is not learned in isolation, that content and language are completely intertwined, that in order for a student to gain mastery of content, they have to have the underlying language skills necessary for that. And that language is broken up into 4 domains: reading, writing, speaking, and listening. A student needs all 4 of these in order to be successful in an academic situation. Our English language development standards, are broken up into 5 different standards: social and instructional language, the language of language arts, the language of mathematics, the language of science, the language of social studies. And as a little side note, sometime in 2021, there will be new standards released. So we'll be watching out for those. These are just some examples of topics that are related to each of the standards. You can see that there's a complete, like I said, crossover with content area. This is for grades 3 through 5, and it should cross over the content area for students who are in grades 3 through 5. WIDA proficiency levels range from level 1 entering to level 6 reaching. 6 is the highest a student can go in any of the 4 domains: listening, reading, writing, and speaking. In order to exit, a student needs a 4.8 composite score. That's a 4.8 overall. We have students who've had 4.6, 4.7. They cannot exit until they have a 4.8 composite. And this is just an example of the type of language that a student can produce at each of the levels. So, for example, pictorial at level 1, pictorial or graphic representation of language in the content areas. Words, phrases, chunks of language. So we've got words, phrases, small bits of language at level 1. And then we go up here to special and technical language at level 6, a variety of sentence links, extended discourse. So we've got everything from simple language, chunks of language, 1 or 2 words, all the way up to specialized, extended discourse, and comparable with their English-speaking peers. This is an example of an L plan that you can print or that you may receive. You can print this from Elevation, and just the different sections that will be printed out on there. At the top, we've got the proficiency levels. You can see that the composite score in this example is a 4.1, which is not quite proficient. That would be 0.7 below exiting. And then we've got the different the language used at different levels there. And then down at the bottom, we've got the can-do descriptors. These tell what a student can do in each of the domains based on their scores. This is a very handy reference. For example, if you've got a writing task for the student, you might look at this and see, what can this student do? And look at the task and see if those match. And if not, there's some differentiation required. WIDA has the philosophy of focusing on what a student can do as opposed to what they can't do. If a student needs differentiation, there are a couple ways we can do that. The first is by modifying the language demand. So, for example, here we've got a writing task. At level 5, they're being asked to critique the impact of significant individuals or events. Level 4, they're being asked to discuss. Level 3, describe. Level 2, define. And level 1 would be reproducing keywords. So we've got a different language demand for each level. So it might be that you're asking your whole class to critique, but maybe you have a level 2 student involved or level 1. You're going to know that the language demand you're asking for has to be modified. They're not going to be able to create an essay of critique. They might be able to create 1 or 2 sentences of define or reproduce keywords. They can still work in the content area and focus on a specific objective, but the language demand has to be modified. The second way we can differentiate is to provide supports. So, for example, level 1 entering, we've got use of bilingual dictionaries, word banks, photographs, and then up to level 4, we've got models. Level 5, we don't have those supports anymore. So as we go down in the levels, we're going to increase our support. And for some examples of types of support you can provide, we've got sensory supports, graphic supports, interactive supports, anything where you're bringing in context to vocabulary. We want context-rich environments. We've got native language support, illustrations, pictures, manipulatives, films, graphs, tables, charts. You can demonstrate a higher idea, like comparing and contrasting using a Venn diagram to support a longer essay or to support just text. You can support broad ideas of cause and effect through a chart that shows cause and effect, and where you break that down for the student pictorially. A few additional supports you could tap into would be, number 1, your ESL teacher and your L student service plan. ESL teachers do have share several schools, so drop them an email if they're not in your building or give them a phone call. Our translators, we've got both digital and bilingual, in our county at the moment. There are 3 Spanish-English translators, and for other languages, we have contracted services. Because those are limited, we also encourage the use of digital translators. We've got things like Google Translate, which has improved greatly over the years. Also, apps like Talking Points. If you look up Talking Points, this is a great way to communicate with parents who don't speak English. We also have parent notices on Transact. So if you have some sort of tasks like field trips, there are forms for that, or classroom reports, something you want to send out. Those are great resources, and you can ask your ESL teacher about those as well. WIDA can do descriptors. When you're given a copy of this Google slide, you can click there and go to the WIDA can do descriptors chart. And also, as I said, they're printed on the L service plan, and they are available in elevation for each student. PSYOP resources. We've got some resources there if you click on the link. PSYOP is a protocol developed for great teaching, and great teaching that brings in different levels and different individual students, including English learners. So that's a great resource there. Colorín Colorado is our last one that has some really great resources for content teachers about how to help English learners in your classroom. Again, if you have any questions, please talk to your ESL teacher at your school. Talk to the bilingual assistant if you need help with a student or parent, and tap into these resources. Thank you so much for listening.